Thank you for joining us.
Chris, thank you for having me.
Roman, in this documentary, you're saying there's a global war on farmers. Tell us about this war.
Well, it's kind of an interesting under the surface war because, you look out at vast farmland across America or Europe and you think, wow, that's pristine, that's very beautiful, it's very idyllic. But underneath the surface, governments around the world have been putting these very onerous regulations on farmers, which have been handcuffing them, all in the name of saving the planet. These green policies, they sound very good on paper. And when you hear about them on the media, they sound like they're the panacea to solve all of the world's problems. But in practice, they're having the effect of just handcuffing farmers. And in the instance of European farmers, they're kicking a large swath of them off the land. In Asia, they're making them essentially not be able to farm their land because they haven't been able to use fertilizer. And here in America, they're using various regulations that are on the books to slowly take more and more land from American farmers and ranchers. So it's that type of a war. It's like you can say it's sort of a cold war on farmers.
Now, in the making of this film, you were on the ground talking with actual farmers. Can you share any stories of individual farmers that you heard while making this film?
Yeah, one of the countries we first went to was the Netherlands because they were sort of the poster child for this farmer protest movement. And we drove around the country, and there's so many farmers who are feeling the effects of these policies that we literally just stopped at random farms that we came across, and almost all of them had stories to tell. This one farm was a 6th-generation farm, and they would have to curtail 95% of their dairy cows in order to meet the government standards. So if you think about it, if you have a large dairy farm operation and you have to get rid of 95% of your cows, for them that would be the equivalent of being left with 6 cows. And so, I mean, there's no business to be had there. That was when they told me that, and then they showed me their cows, I was just shocked. And then they showed me why, because there was a small shrub, maybe a mile up from their farm, up on a hill, that the government needs to protect because they signed an agreement with the European Union 30 years ago saying the shrub needs to remain here. And apparently the nitrogen from the cows is deposited on the shrub for not allowing it to grow as well as it should. Whether that's actually the case or not is dubious, according to the scientists we spoke with. But that was just brutal because, I mean, they would have to pack up and just move, right? After 6 generations of farming on this land, it's brutal. And similar stories here in the U.S. as well.
Now, Roman, the subtitle of your documentary is "Will You Eat the Bugs?" I personally will not be eating any bugs, but why did you choose that subtitle?
Christopher, you think you're not going to be eating bugs. You think that right now. Someday you'll be looking at this clip thinking, man, was I mistaken when you're going to the store and the hamburger patty is $47 a pound, but the bugs, they're only $7 per pound. And so you're sort of forced to eat the bugs. The bug aspect of it was interesting, and it's not something I actually anticipated going into this project. When we were driving around, again, the Netherlands, we came across some farmers which were alluding to insect farm operations sprouting up. And they were saying that some of the farmers, because they were getting kicked off of their cattle ranches and dairy productions, they were moving into insect farming. And so we wound up calling a ton of these production sites. Very few of them actually were willing to talk to us. Even fewer were willing to actually show us their operations. One of the people was willing to show us their operations. But that's sort of the move, where it's like, in order to save the planet, the idea is that traditional agriculture, creates too many greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, we have to curtail the farmers, shrink that sector. But what are people going to eat? Where's the protein going to come from for human civilization? Well, here come the rise of the insect farms. And it's happening. There's a large insect farm that's being built right now in America. It's going to go online in 2025. There's a huge one that was built recently in France. Recently, insects were approved by the European Health Commission as a safe food. And so the regulations are being opened up. And in the future, it really might be the case, if we keep going down this road, that meat will be a luxury item and insects will be the main source of protein.
What are you hoping audiences take away from watching your documentary?
I think my biggest takeaway for people is, well, twofold. One is I like to equip people with the facts and the knowledge and a language that they can use when they're speaking with people who are pushing forward these policies, which sound beautiful and they sound great on paper. But when you look underneath the hood, it's not so great. The second thing is that if you go back into the 1950s and you look at the Great Leap Forward over in China, the Great Leap Forward sounded like the best idea possible. We're going to launch China into the frontier of steel production. We're going to become an industrial powerhouse. We're going to leapfrog over the other countries which have had a head start on us. But now, when we look back in hindsight, the Great Leap Forward is synonymous with a famine that killed somewhere between 30 to 50 million people. And so right now, what I fear is that we're in the middle of a green leap forward. I really want to avoid a situation where 100 years from now, we'll look back to this period and to the UN's Agenda 2030 and say, man, that was a rough famine that killed 1 billion people. But that we only know that in hindsight. So I'd like to just equip people with the facts to avoid a possible disaster.
All right, Roman Balmakov, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.